Hello, I'm Joe Davidge, the director of the Georgia Center for the Book, an affiliate of the Library of Congress. The Centers for the Book help carry out the mission of the National Center for the Book, which is to promote books, reading, libraries, and literacy nationwide. We also promote our state's literary heritage by focusing on books and authors with a connection to our states. Every year, as part of our participation in the Library of Congress's National Book Festival, each state center chooses a book with a local connection as part of the Great Reads from Great Places initiative. You can learn more about that reading initiative at read.gov. Today, we are speaking with the Great Reads authors from several states whose book all feature a theme of friendship. They were invited by the affiliate centers for the book from Connecticut, Indiana, Montana, North Carolina, New Jersey, Pennsylvania, and Georgia. I would also like to thank Lisa Comstock, Suzanne Walker, Kim Anderson, Melissa Giblin, Renee Schwartz, and Carla Schmidt, the directors of those centers for the book, for their hard work and dedication at this event, and for selecting 6 wonderful books to represent their states. Right now, let's learn a little bit more about our authors today. Abdul-Razak Zachariah was born and raised in Connecticut. He is a youth worker and children's book author. Kekla Magoon, author of Season of Six Malones, selected by Indiana, grew up in Fort Wayne, Indiana, and wrote her first novel when she was in high school. Since then, she has written several novels and nonfiction books for young readers. 3 of her books have received Coretta Scott King honors, including The Season of Six Malone. From Montana, Hank Green's A Beautifully Foolish Endeavor. Hank Green is currently a resident of Missoula, Montana, and he is a science communicator, video creator, entrepreneur, and most recently, a novelist. Green co-created the popular YouTube channel Vlogbrothers with his brother, author John Green, as well as educational channels SciShow and Crash Course. From North Carolina, and author of The Edge of Anything, we have Nora Shalaway Carpenter, who is currently living in Asheville, North Carolina. Her work has appeared in acclaimed young adult anthology Rural Voices 15, Authors Challenge Assumptions About Small Town America, and the novel The Edge of Anything is her debut novel. Ali Stroker made history as the first person in a wheelchair to appear on Broadway and win a Tony Award. She has also starred and recurred in a number of television shows, including the hit show Glee. The Chance to Fly is her first novel. Stacy Davidovitz is an author and playwright and screenwriter based in New York City. From Pennsylvania, we feature Jamila Tompkins Bigelow and her book, Your Name is a Song. Jamila Tompkins Bigelow is a Philadelphia-based educator and children's book author. Her picture books and short stories, which feature young Black and Muslim protagonists, have been widely recognized. And finally, from the great state of Georgia, Aisha Saeed and her book, Bilal Cook's Doll. Bilal Cook's Doll is Aisha Saeed's debut picture book. She is the New York Times bestselling author of several middle grade novels and young adult novels, and currently she lives in Atlanta, Georgia. We've asked these authors today to think about the theme of this year's festival, Open a Book, Open the World, and what that means to them, as well as the theme of our panel, friendship. Now let's hear from each of our authors. Abdul-Razak, what book opened the world to you? And can you tell us a little bit about it?
Yeah, thank you so much, Joe. I think for me, when I was growing up, the Corduroy books opened the world for me, and particularly a book where Corduroy goes to the laundromat with his owner. And I think not so much about the story, but more so it was one of the first times I saw a book where there are people of color who were throughout that space, and they were very casually in that space, and it served as a background in a very respectful way. And I think seeing that kind of community that reflected my own opened up the world of what books could be representing for kids. Before that, I think I just saw a lot of like cartoon animals in different spaces, and not a lot of people who looked like me or people around me showing up. So I think Corduroy stands up there for me as one of those books.
Excellent, thank you so very much. Nora, what about you?
Yeah, so I think for me, the book I would choose is The Secret Garden, because for that book kind of showed me that books can go beyond just like a fun story that can transport me someplace, but that also like the connection that Dickens has with nature, which is something that like I grew up in a very rural community in a rural place. And so the value that was placed on that and how it was magical, like literally talked about magic and stuff, is just something that connected so much with me as a person from a rural place, that I kind of was like, oh yeah, I can write stories that kind of walk that line between contemporary realism and with some like magical wonder. And the book, The Edge of Anything, it doesn't actually have any magic in it. Some of my other stuff does, but that's the first book that I really remember just like really inspiring me in that way.
Excellent. Thank you, Nora. Jamila, what about you?
The book that I remember the most, and I read a lot as a young kid. I actually have the book because I got it recently. It's called The Shimmer Shine Queens. And I read a lot of books when I was a child, a lot of books that I felt did actually open up different worlds for me. But one thing is that I didn't see my experience really reflected in books. I just kind of assumed that was the typical, like, my experience could not really be in books. So I grew up, at this point, I got this book when I was 10, and I was, living in Philadelphia, a very urban environment, went to school with nothing but Black kids. And I just had, my experience was very different from the ones that I was reading about, the girls that I was reading about in the books from, like, by Judy Blume and Beverly Cleary. So this book was really important for me because it like basically told me that I could actually write stories about myself and people like me. It was a great mirror for me. And the people talked like the people I knew, and they did things the way that people I knew did them. And I always thought books were not supposed to be that. So it opened the world to me because it actually showed me that my world was valid for a story. So this one, it's called The Shimmer Shine Queens.
Excellent. Thank you, Jamila. And what about you, Aisha?
For me, I've loved reading. I mean, my earliest memories are going to the library on Saturdays with my parents and basically taking every tote bag, everything we could find, just because we would max out every one of our library cards, just getting books. And so every book has opened a door for me in a different way, helped me see things in a new way. One book that really I feel like opened, like my horizons and to see a world beyond was actually a book that was, I don't think it was meant for kids. It was a Judy Blume book though, and it was called Letters to Judy. I think it's out of print now potentially, but I remember I just loved Judy Blume. So I would just, if I saw a book with her name on it, I would get it. It was just, automatically going to get borrowed. And so I remember I read it. And it was letters that kids wrote to Judy Blume, and she had compiled them with her responses. And it was what we wish our parents knew. So these were letters that kids wrote about what they wish their parents knew. And I personally grew up for a very long time with bullying at school and a lot of difficult situations. And I always thought I was alone. I thought I deserved it. And it was this book and seeing kids with my particular struggles who were also keeping it to themselves, and Judy telling them, you're okay. This is not about you, and it will get better. And that promise that it will get better really opened doors for me. And I think as an adult now, I look back at that book and I think that book was actually for parents. It was a parenting book so that parents could read it and see like what their children go through. But it really speaks to how it's great for kids to read beyond their age groups and beyond their levels, because they might find something in an unexpected place that could speak to them. So I think that would be a book that that really guided me and shaped me.
Thank you, Aisha. Well, now that we've discussed favorite reads of yours from your childhood, let's actually talk about your great read books this year. And let's also discuss, how do your books open the world for young readers? So once again, let's start with Connecticut and Abdul-Razak.
Yeah, I think my book, it's funny because my book is based off of the world that I grew up in. It's based in an apartment complex very similar to the one I had. And based on my younger sister's interactions with that. And I think her world, to me, I'm 10 years older than her, when I was watching, was so interesting. It was a huge world to like see a child playing in our apartment complex and being able to see the imaginative space that was there for them and to interact with other friends in that space and always feel comfortable, especially because the book is set at night. And I think I heard a lot of narratives growing up around people's assumptions about our neighborhood and assumptions about our neighborhood at a particular time of day, that to be able to see and to kind of showcase children playing at night in a community where they felt safe and where they could see other kids their age and older folks, created a world that I'm not sure a lot of other kids will see in children's books, and ones that I did not see in the children's books that I had growing up. And so I think the world that's opened up is just seeing that imaginative space is possible, and especially possible in these spaces that people say really negative things about when they shouldn't, and when there's so much love and positivity and creativity possible in that area.
Excellent, thank you so much. Nora, what about you and your book?
So when I was growing up, as a teenager, I was really into sports, particularly volleyball. That was kind of like my whole identity, my whole sense of self really came from athletics. And I just couldn't find novels about female athletes, particularly ones that were more, it was about more than just the sport, right? It was about a character that played a sport, but also was a full, well-rounded character. And so The Edge of Anything has two protagonists. One of them is a volleyball star, because I wanted that, I wanted girls, particularly girl readers, to be able to find a female character playing sports. And then the other protagonist, Len, she is suffering from undiagnosed OCD. And this is super important to me because, again, I didn't feel like there was good, it's really starting to change now, which is wonderful in the YA space, but I think it still has a long way to go of finding authentic mental health representation. And I went through a period as a young adult where I suffered a trauma which triggered what I eventually found out was OCD, like severe OCD. And so it was undiagnosed for a while, and I didn't know what was happening. I thought I was losing my mind. And I had a good support system. And so I thought about, but I still couldn't find like books that supported me in the way that I needed, or just kind of didn't talk down. We're just like showing a character kind of coming through a really, really difficult time. And so when I was able to kind of have the emotional distance away from that experience, it became really important to me to create a character like that. And so that's where Len comes from. And I hope that she and Sage's interactions with her as a friend too, as like Sage sees her in a way that other people don't. They just like look at this girl and see this weird girl, you know, like that they don't understand her. And so I just really hope that readers can both empathize with both of the characters, and maybe, you know, learn a little bit of compassion too in when they go out and see other people in their lives, and maybe understand that we're all dealing with things that are not so obvious on the surface.
Thank you so much, Nora. What about you, Jamila?
So in my book, Your Name is a Song, for example, or Mommy's Kimar, I really am hoping that children who identify with the main characters, who see themselves in the main characters, that for them, when they open this book, it's opening for them the possibility of being affirmed, of being powerful, of having agency, of being able to speak for themselves, being able to be proud of themselves. And loving who they are. So I'm hoping that happens. And then for other children who may not share the same experience, I hope that it is opening a more diverse world for them, where they can see other people's experiences and also learn some empathy as well. So these are the things that I'm hoping for, is it's affirmation and also empathy.
And finally to you, Aisha, let's hear about your book.
Well, I want to just piggyback on what Jamil was talking about, Your Name is a Song, because I just wanted to say it is an affirmation for my kids. And we got that book, and my kids were reading Your Name is a Song, and there's lots of different names in it. And, you know, there's insecurities perhaps about names, and like how, you know, every name is so beautiful. And there's a part in it where there's a boy named Bob, and he's like, what about my name? Can we turn my name into a song? And so the teacher or not the teacher, the parent sings Bob, like just this beautiful Bob. And my kids could not stop laughing. And they were laughing because they're like, why would anyone need to make anyone feel better about the name Bob? And because this name was, you know, there's so many other names in the book that kids may feel insecure about. My kids have names that are not, you know, perhaps names that you might get on a coffee mug at a Disney store, you know, like a traditional name like that. And so it felt really affirming to them that, you know, all names are beautiful, and even the names that are commonplace might be different to other people and to other places. And so it really opened up their world to, you know, it just really opened up their world, and it really affirmed them, and really made them happy to see even those, you know, very traditional, like, you know, WASP names getting the same affection and the same love as all the other names, if that makes sense. It was really beautiful. So anyways, I love that book a lot. So I just had to love on that for a second. My book, I hope it does the same thing. You know, I hope Bilal Cooks Doll, which is a story about a little boy that loves to cook with his dad. You know, it's a story about community, it's about patience, it's about trying new things. And yeah, I really hope that it does all of that, the same things. And I remember one reviewer about this book said that the book was radical and subversive. And they said that because Bilal is a little boy that cooks with his father. And so Bilal is Pakistani American like me, and he is Muslim like me. And just the name, like it's not an identity story, but you can see that they are because of the name and other identifiers in the story. And so it was really fascinating that somebody who reviewed this book said that it was radical and subversive simply because it was a Muslim man cooking with his son. And that to them was eye-opening. And so there's ways that our books are going to be doors and open, you know, horizons that we may not even have thought of when we were doing it. So I thought that was interesting.
Thank you, Aisha. And I truly have to say, as a Center for the Book Director, I love the fact that you love on other authors' books, and it's just such a wonderful and supportive community, not only through the Centers for the Book, but authors and illustrators around the country and around the world supporting each other. And that is truly, truly heartening.
That's what makes KidLit very special. So, yeah.
Truly, truly. Well, and I think with your remembrances about your favorite book, you know, I mean, it just, KidLit nowadays, you know, it instills in us those great memories that take you immediately back to your local library, to your local bookstore, in that special place, you know, before growing up in other aspects of life, you know, sort of came in and maybe influenced us in different ways. It was that very, you know, pure moment where you open a book and just see the words, the pictures on the page. So I did find a very interesting theme in your answers to your questions and would like to touch on that. And that's the theme, of course, of diversity in children's literature and the assumptions that we make as people, and how your books challenge those assumptions and maybe shine light on things that we need to recognize out in the world, and also about building empathy through children's literature and making those books a mirror for a better world, or maybe being an agent of change for folks. So if we could talk on that for a moment, we'll start once again with Abdul-Razak.
Yeah, I think in writing this book and just kind of keeping track of the books that I really love to read now, I think there's a real importance for me to show the variety of people within the communities that I exist in. And when writing the character of Amani for The Night Is Yours, it was one thing to create a character that was a Black girl who lived in this community. It was another thing to create a character who expressed their frustration in a kind of silent way, and offering that that is a type of person, that is a type of child and that's a type of Black child and that's a type of Black girl child that can exist. And to also offer in the kind of background of that, a parent who understands that that's how their child processes things and gives them the space to do that. And it's not a large central point of the story that I was trying to tell, but it's a part of it to say that this is a normal thing that can happen. It can be part of the period of play that child has outside on any given day. And it's something that is really important to normalize for other kids to see, and especially other parents to see who might be reading this book to their kids, so that they don't start relying on just particular stereotypes of what they're seeing of a child. I think for me and for my younger sister, we were both kind of quieter kids who were less quiet when we were actually around people we were comfortable with. And I think that that is not something that was always assumed of us and assumed of other Black children who grew up around me. And I think giving that grace to the fact that any child can be quiet, or any child can be an introvert, or any child can choose when they want to be an introvert and extrovert is like really important. And on top of that, it's the fact that a child can kind of move through space and be thoughtful about what they need, and that adults should be respecting that. I think that is a kind of diversity in personality that I really wanted to get into, particular to the way that I was presenting Black children, and something that in my writing I want to continue to do. And I think it's something that I really appreciate when I see other stories that show that, yes, this is a story that showcases a character with particular identity, and that identity includes the depth of who they are as a person, the depth of how they show their emotions. It doesn't have to be relegated or kept small to just one maybe racial identifier, ethnic identifier. So yeah, I think that's the kind of course that I want to take when writing stories like this, is centering all of those ideas.
Excellent. Thank you so very much. Nora, what about you?
Yeah, and I love that answer too, because it reminded me so much of my own kids. Like I have 3 kids and they have 3 such different personalities. And it's really, my youngest is so shy when she first meets people, but then people that know her, they're like, there's no way she's shy. She's like jumping all over the place, you know? So I love that that is valued in books, and that kids can see that it's okay. They don't always have to be the same way as other kids. This is so wonderful. So in The Edge of Anything, it was really important for me to show Len's OCD in a way that is, I think, not a lot of people maybe wouldn't recognize as OCD unless you specialize in mental health, or you have some experience with it. I think there's a lot of, in popular media, sometimes it's common to give like a character a quirk, like, oh, they're quirky and they have this OCD and it's so funny, let's laugh at them, whereas anyone that has actually suffered that condition in real life, it's anything but laughable. Like it's a nightmare if it's untreated. And so I really wanted to show what that lived experience was like. And also, and I talk about it in the author's note too, because just like with any mental health condition, it shows, it presents so differently in different people. And so this is one person's experience of OCD, and that doesn't mean that that's how it's going to show up in everyone, but like these are some things and these are some signs. And so it's almost like a little bit of a mystery with Sage, like picking up on some stuff, like what's going on here. And but that was really important to me, because even people that knew about OCD sometimes would read my book and they'd be like, oh, I didn't know, like I thought OCD was only like people that count, or like I thought OCD meant you were like a super neat freak. And anyone that would come and see my office, they'd be like, oh, this doesn't make sense. So or that you had to count things a number of times, and that's just that can be how it presents, but not all the time. And then also I did want to say something about the parents too, because my book, there's 2 sets of parents, and they are also, I think they can be kind of, if something's going on with your with these kids, sometimes people are like, well, what are the parents doing if they're around? Like, why aren't they noticing this? Why aren't they? And I tried really hard to like, I don't like when parents are always bad, or parents are always, if they're portrayed as just like completely not if they're not figuring out what's going on with their kids, like what's the reason, what's going on. And so I think it can be really easy. Like parents have like full busy lives, and there are lots of reasons why they might miss signs in their kids. And I wanted to bring that to the forefront too. So if any adults read it, that they could, just be mindful of that.
Thank you so much, Nora. And what about you, Jamila?
I would say Your Name's a Song. It really challenges certain assumptions about what people or how people who maybe have names from other cultures, how they should deal with people from mainstream cultures not being able to say their name. I think that that's really what it is. It's pretty straightforward. It's the idea that you can tell someone, that you're not saying my name correctly, and that you can have the expectation that they're going to try and that they're going to fix that. And it was very important for me in Your Name's a Song to actually have the teacher change. So I wanted to really indicate that and show that, because in the beginning, when we see the teacher and the teacher has mispronounced this girl's name, it's what the book is about, really, is people mispronouncing her name and making fun of her name. And the teacher, when we first see the teacher, she's sort of hollering names, and it's kind of a job that she wants to get done. And, when the girl tells her, I'm singing my name so you'll learn it, she's like, names are not songs, right? But at the end, it is the teacher who was like, well, let's hear your song again. And it's the teacher who sings her song first, right? And changes that behavior. So, because I am a former teacher, that was sort of in the back of my mind, that I know that a lot of educators, a lot of teachers are people with big hearts who really do care. And I wanted to challenge them even in that book to kind of say to themselves, because I think they would take on that challenge, to kind of think to themselves, you know what, I can change this. I don't, I can care about this. I can change my attitude about it. So that was one of the things. And for kids out there, to know that, yes, you don't, just because no one else in your class has the same name, just because no one in your neighborhood has the same kind of name, does not mean that it isn't worthy of being said or sung.
Excellent. Thank you, Jamila.
Yeah.
And finally, Aisha, what about you?
Yeah, so I kind of talked about how just the fact that it was a father-son cooking duo seemed to have challenged, an assumption. Growing into any story, I just think oftentimes as creators, as BIPOC creators, like just telling our stories, just a joyful story or like a happy story, just kind of existing on the page can sometimes even just be a challenging of assumptions. I remember there was one reader that emailed me because they were upset that there's a pool in the story and the kids are all playing at the pool, and they were like, that doesn't feel very realistic. And I was just a little confused because I was like, okay, so I guess in your assumption this kids shouldn't be at a pool, like why? It's very interesting what people's opinions can reveal about themselves and their own preconceived notions about books. So it's so hard to know so I didn't set out in this story, Bilal Cook's Dal. I set out to write it because dal lentils are it's a basic staple in South Asia. Like everyone eats it. It's cheap, it's healthy, and it's quick to make, very simple. And a lot of people don't know about it. And my kids love it. And a lot of their friends had never heard of it. And so really that was where this story came from, was just to bring this dish to my kids' community, to our community. So I think a lot of kids have issues around trying new foods. Some adults do too. And so I've been really heartened to hear from parents who've, said that, that it's helped their kids maybe not even try dal, but just try something new, because maybe that something might be good for them. So on that kid level, but yeah, there's also going to be so many other aspects of just existing on the page as a brown Muslim kid that's going to challenge assumptions that I may not even know about, but that are being challenged just by the existence of this particular diverse book. So, yeah.
Excellent. Thank you so much. Well, now I'm going to put you all on the spot, because as I sit here, and of course, the Decatur Library and we are hosted by a public library, and I think that's so important, and that the Library of Congress is sponsoring the National Book Festival. Just let us know, what was your childhood library, if you remember it, or what is your current library system that you use? So we'll start with Abdul-Razak. Abdul, do you remember?
Yeah, so I grew up in West Haven, Connecticut, and we had the West Haven Public Libraries there. And I would go to two throughout my childhood. One that my mom would bring me to when I was a younger kid, and I would just kind of hang out there all the time. It was very much like a place to post up in the middle of the day during the summer. And then as a teenager, one of my best friends during that time, her mom was a librarian in the system as well. And so after school, we would go and hang out at another branch, and as like teenagers, just be there doing work. And I think now today I live in Cambridge, and I go to the Cambridge Public Library so often that this summer I was sitting outside eating breakfast before I went in, and one of the librarians said, "Oh, before you go into the office, right?" Which I don't work there, but I am there enough where I might as well be one of the librarians. So I very much love my public libraries wherever they are, and try to be a kind of constant fixture there if I can.
Well, right there, that sounds like the opportunity for a second career, should you need one. Nora, what about you?
I love this question. So it's a little bit sad for me. I grew up in a really rural place, like I said, in rural West Virginia. And so our public library was not very accessible. And so I don't have a lot of memories from there. And mostly the memories that I do have are that I couldn't find the books that I was interested in because there was just no budget. But I live like 5 minutes away from a library now, and it's amazing. I'm in Asheville, and so our local library is Skyland South Buncombe, and the teen librarian there, Mr. Ty, we call him. My kids think he's a superstar, and we're there so often. You know, he's always giving us book recommendations. Like it's very close to where I pick up my kids from school, and so we just always stop in at the library. The Buncombe County Library System is just amazing. They can get all these books for you. And, you know, so many library systems are like that now. So it's such a difference from where I lived growing up. You know, I'm so grateful and so grateful that my kids can have this experience, but also very much why I'm an advocate for rural places and rural funding, which is, you know, where the whole Rural Voices anthology comes into. But
Excellent. Thank you, Nora. And just so you know, I am also a former West Virginian as well.
Really? Where?
Yes, I grew up in Fairmont, West Virginia.
Oh, we were basically neighbors because I grew up in Cameron, and that's like only an hour away.
Truly. Well, and I always took inspiration that Fairmont is the home of author John Knowles, who wrote A Separate Peace.
Yeah.
And I kind of recognized a couple of the locations in the book from my hometown. So I always take great pride in that. What about you, Jamila?
So growing up, I didn't really have much of a home library, or I wasn't even visiting libraries very much at all. My parents were very working class, and they just didn't really think about that, you know. So I remember we had some encyclopedias. We never had a complete set, but we had some, and we had, you know, these Civil War books that my dad liked the Civil War, so he had some of those, and you know, they got it for us ostensibly, and they were proud of having those. But I was someone who loved fiction, and those books didn't really appeal to me. And really, my library was the teacher's classroom, what she had in her classroom. And you know, thank you, Miss Lee. I mean, like the book that I showed you earlier, The Shimmer Shine Queens, all these different kinds of books that I got to explore really came through going to a public school and having access to it there. And today, I love the Free Library of Philadelphia and the different branches. It hasn't been as accessible during the COVID, you know, this pandemic. So that's been kind of sad for me because it's not as easy to just kind of go in and sit and browse. I think they're going to change that soon, but hasn't been as easy. But I love my local library, and they know me there, and I love seeing my books on the shelves. I think they like to display it for me, which really warms my heart. So.
Excellent. Thank you, Jamila. And what about you, Aisha?
Oh gosh, growing up, I actually didn't even know that there were bookstores. I just thought there were libraries. I didn't know until I think I was like, I don't know, in high school maybe, because we only went to the library, and it was just part of our family. It was part of our culture. Like we went for story time, we went for activities, and so growing up, like once I had my own children, actually, like here in Atlanta, Georgia, like that's what we do. I mean, the library is part of our lives. We go once a week, if not more. And when the pandemic happened, and libraries shut down, it was devastating and extremely expensive to buy books. So many books. Like I already buy books because I like to, support books, but like my children are voracious readers, and you just can't, like, you can't keep up the way you could at a library. And it was really hard for them because they'd be like, I want this book and I want that book. And I'm like, this isn't a library situation. I can't buy 100 books in one sitting. And so, and then I remember DeKalb libraries opened up, but just for curbside pickup. So you had to pick your books and go get them, but you could only get 15. And I mean, we would just constantly be going through, like, I remember I would call my local library, I would just say hello, and they'd be like, oh, hey, Aisha, how's it going? They knew me by my voice because we would call so much. And yeah, now it's open. I'm homeschooling my kids because of the pandemic right now. And I mean, the library is our lifeline. We actually bought an entire bookshelf, which is just for our library books, because DeKalb has a 75 book limit, and the manager at our local branch waives that limit for us frequently because we will go there and get like 90 books and we're just standing there ready to check out. And she's like, okay, fine, you can get a few more. She's like, I know you'll be back. You'll be back at the end of the week with more. So, I mean, it is no exaggeration to say that the library has been our lifeline through this pandemic. Like when it was shut down, we really felt it. And now that it's opened up, it is truly seeing us through. Gosh, and we're also emotional about libraries, aren't we? Just that they're so important. They're important as authors for our livelihood, because those purchases are what keep, especially writers who write these diverse stories, a lot of them, like the libraries, are the support for us. And then as patrons, I mean, there's such a lifeline.
I think we are all very emotionally connected to our libraries. And by the way, the Georgia Center for the Book is hosted by the DeKalb County Public Library. So we thank you for your patronage, Aisha. And we also thank that library manager for being exceptional and offering you great customer service and waiving that limit of books.
Yes.
Well, once again, thank you all for joining us and having this wonderful conversation this afternoon. Abdul-Razak, Nora, Jamila, Aisha, thank you so much for being so generous with your time and not only sharing your great reads books, but a little bit insight into your writing and, of course, what inspires you as authors and readers as well. If you would all like to find out more about the Library of Congress, I encourage you to go to loc.gov. And if you would like to find out more about the National Book Festival and all of the other great reads from great places, and to check out the Center for the Book, please go to read.gov. Not only do we have 7 great reads in this particular panel, but there are great reads from all over the United States. And we encourage you to read as many of them as possible, possibly by checking them out at your favorite local library. Once again, thank you all so very much, and we will see you again very, very soon.